The shuttle docked with the massive Galactic Council station, and Daniel Cooper stood from his seat with practiced calm despite the butterflies dancing in his stomach, knowing this moment would define Earth's future among the stars. Though he couldn't have imagined how right he was about that. He was a compact man by human standards, standing at 5 feet and 4 inches tall, with brown hair cut military short and steady gray eyes that had seen him through a dozen difficult negotiations on Earth. And now he would represent his entire species to a galaxy that had watched humanity from afar for decades, before finally extending an invitation to join the council. The airlock hissed open and Daniel stepped through carrying Max's specialized travel carrier in one hand and his diplomatic briefcase in the other, entering a corridor so vast it could have swallowed a city block, with ceilings that soared at least 50 feet overhead and walls that gleamed with bioluminescent patterns pulsing in colors his eyes struggled to process. 3 beings waited for him in the reception area, and Daniel's first thought was that he had somehow shrunk in the shuttle ride, because the smallest of them towered over him by at least 3 feet. Commander Zixter was the first to approach, his reptilian form covered in emerald scales that caught the light like precious gems, and his vertical pupils fixed on Daniel with what could only be described as amusement bordering on contempt. Standing easily 8 feet tall with a tail that added another 4 feet to his impressive length. So this is the human delegate. Zixter's voice came through the translation device attached to Daniel's collar, carrying a tone of barely concealed mockery. Earth sends us their warriors, I assume. Their strongest and most impressive specimens. Daniel kept his expression neutral and extended his hand in the human greeting gesture. Though he knew Zixter wouldn't take it. I am Daniel Cooper, representing the United Earth government, and I'm honored to address the council today. Ambassador Krulva clicked forward on 6 insectoid legs, her compound eyes reflecting Daniel's image 1,000 times over, and her mandibles chittered in what the translator converted to laughter. How delightful, they truly are a planet of miniatures. I've seen juvenile Krulva larger than this one, the third being, whose name Daniel's briefing materials identified as Counselor Vexmar, simply stared down at him with 4 eyes arranged vertically on a crystalline face, radiating silent judgment. I trust the accommodations will be suitable, Daniel said, refusing to acknowledge the insults. I'm eager to present Earth's petition for full council membership and trading rights. Petition. Zixter repeated the word as if tasting something sour. You understand that council membership is earned through demonstration of strength, capability, and contribution to galactic civilization, not simply requested like a child asking for sweets. Daniel felt his jaw tighten but maintained his diplomatic smile. Earth has much to offer. Our scientific achievements, cultural diversity, and your pet makes noise, Krulva interrupted, pointing at the carrier where Max had begun to meow loudly, apparently unhappy with being confined. This is Max, my service animal, Daniel explained, having prepared for questions about bringing an Earth creature aboard. Humans often bond with companion animals for emotional support, and council regulations allow for necessary accommodations. Zixter leaned down, bringing his massive head close to the carrier, and his forked tongue flicked out to taste the air. A predator species. How fitting that even your pets are tiny. What does it hunt? Insects? Small rodents? He's a domesticated cat, Daniel said evenly. And he's been cleared by your own medical and security teams. The commander's laugh boomed through the corridor like thunder. Domesticated. The galaxy's newest species brings tame animals to a council of conquerors and warlords. This will be quite entertaining. They led Daniel through winding corridors that seemed designed to showcase the station's impossible grandeur, passing by windows that looked out on the star fields so dense they appeared as rivers of light, and chambers where beings of hundreds of different species conducted the business of a galaxy spanning thousands of worlds. Every species he passed seemed to tower over him, from the floating gas-bag creatures that drifted near the ceiling to the massive, rock-like beings that shook the floor with each ponderous step. And Daniel felt the weight of every stare, heard the whispered comments his translator tried valiantly to convert. Look at the human. So small. How did they achieve space travel? Perhaps they're not the dominant species on their world, Max meowed again. Louder this time, and Daniel noticed something odd. Several of the older aliens, those whose species tags marked them as ancient or long established, stopped their conversations to stare at the carrier with expressions he couldn't quite read. Something between recognition and concern. The council chamber itself was a marvel of architecture and intimidation. A circular room with seating arranged in ascending tiers so that every delegate looked down upon whoever stood in the central speaking area. Like a coliseum designed for verbal combat rather than physical. Daniel was directed to the speaker's platform, a raised disc barely 3 feet across, while Zixter and the other escorts took their seats among the tiers above. And he set Max's carrier down beside him as the chamber filled with representatives from across known space. The council recognizes Earth's delegate. A deep voice resonated through the chamber, coming from all directions at once. You may present your petition. Daniel squared his shoulders and activated his presentation display, showing images of Earth, its diverse ecosystems, its billions of humans working together across a once divided world. Honored council members, I come before you to request full membership for Earth and open trading rights with galactic civilization. On what grounds? Zixter's voice cut through the chamber. What can your tiny world offer us that we cannot produce ourselves or acquire from established partners? Earth offers innovation, diversity of thought, and a unique perspective shaped by our world's particular challenges, Daniel began. But he could see the dismissive expressions forming across dozens of alien faces. Your world is small, Krelva chimed in. Your species is small, your representative is smaller still, and you bring a tiny pet to a galactic council. This suggests your understanding of strength and power is fundamentally flawed. Max chose that moment to meow loudly again, a sound that echoed strangely in the vast chamber. And Daniel noticed more of those intense stares from the older council members, particularly from a wizened being in the highest tier, whose species tag read simply, Mothrak, Ancient. Size is not the only measure of worth, Daniel said firmly. Earth may be young among galactic civilizations, but we've overcome tremendous obstacles, united a divided world, and developed technologies that your own survey teams noted as remarkably advanced for our age. Technologies you stole from observing our vessels, Zixter sneered. Come now, human, let's be honest about Earth's achievements. You are primitives who got lucky, nothing more. The chamber filled with sounds of agreement, clicking, buzzing, and rumbling approval of Zixter's assessment. And Daniel felt his presentation slipping away before it had truly begun. The council has heard enough, the omnipresent voice announced. We will adjourn to consider Earth's petition. Though I suspect the outcome is predetermined, serve the strong, human, and perhaps your species will earn a place in our civilization. As the chamber began to empty, Daniel looked down at Max's carrier and whispered, Well, buddy, that could have gone better. Max's green eyes stared back at him through the mesh, and for just a moment, Daniel could have sworn they glowed with a light that had nothing to do with the chamber's illumination. A golden radiance that appeared and vanished so quickly he convinced himself he'd imagined it. But he hadn't imagined the way Elder Mothrak was staring at the carrier. His ancient face twisted in an expression that looked remarkably like fear. Daniel had barely made it back to his assigned quarters when the door chime sounded, a musical tone that seemed to come from the walls themselves rather than any visible speaker, and he glanced at Max, who had finally been released from his carrier and was now exploring the strange room with typical feline curiosity. "Come in," Daniel called, expecting perhaps Captain Lisa Morgan, the human security escort who had been assigned to help him navigate the station. Instead, Elder Mothrak shuffled through the doorway, moving with the careful deliberation of extreme age, his species resembling something between a praying mantis and a monk, with robes that seemed to be part of his exoskeleton rather than separate clothing. "Forgive the intrusion." The elder's voice was soft, almost gentle, a stark contrast to the harsh tones Daniel had heard all day. "But we must speak privately, immediately, before you make a terrible mistake." Daniel gestured to the room's seating area. Though the furniture seemed designed for beings much larger than himself, "Of course, Elder Mothrak. Though I'm not sure what mistake you're referring to." The ancient being's compound eyes fixed on Max, who had paused in his exploration to sit near the window, silhouetted against the starfield beyond. "That creature, you call it a cat?" "Yes, Max is a domesticated feline from Earth," Daniel confirmed, confusion creeping into his voice. "Is there a problem with the medical clearance?" "Medical clearance?" Mothrak's laugh was like wind through dry leaves. "My young human friend, bringing a Terran feline to this council is perhaps the most dangerous thing anyone has done in 10,000 years, and you did it unknowingly, which makes it either wonderfully innocent or catastrophically naive." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine despite the comfortable temperature. "I don't understand. Max is just a pet." "He's harmless. Harmless," the elder repeated, settling carefully onto a bench. "Tell me, does your species keep historical records, stories from before your written history?" "We have myths and legends," Daniel said slowly. "Stories passed down through generations before we developed writing." "Then perhaps you have stories of cats," Mothrak suggested. "Of how they came to live with humans, of why they chose your species above all others on your world." Daniel shrugged. "There are theories that cats domesticated themselves, that they started living near human settlements to hunt rodents attracted to our grain stores. And over time we formed a mutually beneficial relationship." Mutually beneficial. The elder's tone carried a weight that made those simple words sound ominous. "My species has records that span 100,000 of your years. Human. And in those records, there are warnings, prophecies, and historical accounts that your scientists would consider impossible." Max meowed softly from his position by the window, and Mothrak visibly flinched. 10,000 years ago, this sector of the galaxy was ruled by a species we called the Sovereign Ones, the elder began, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller recounting ancient history. "They were feline in form, though much larger than your companion, with abilities that bordered on what primitive species might call magic, but which we understood as advanced quantum manipulation." Daniel wanted to laugh, but something in the elder's serious expression stopped him. "You're saying there was a civilization of giant cats?" "Not giant, precisely. About the size of your Earth lions from my understanding of your planet's fauna," Mothrak corrected. "But their technology was beyond anything the galaxy had seen before or since. They could manipulate reality at the quantum level, opening doorways through space, communicating across vast distances instantaneously, and they had a presence, an awareness that made even the proudest species bow in respect." "What happened to them?" Daniel asked despite his skepticism. "They left," the elder said simply. "One day, they announced they were departing to explore beyond our galaxy, beyond the reach of our telescopes and understanding, and they took their technology with them. But they left behind a warning." Mothrak leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "They said they had scattered their descendants across certain worlds, placing them where they felt the species most deserved guardianship. And they warned that any who threatened these chosen species would face the awakening of the sovereign bloodline." Daniel glanced at Max, who was now grooming his paw with complete indifference to the conversation. And you think Earth cats are these descendants? I don't think human, I know. Mothrak's certainty was absolute. The moment I saw your companion, I recognized the markings described in our oldest records. The way he moves, the intelligence in his eyes. Everything matches the ancient descriptions of sovereign juveniles. Elder Mothrak. With all due respect, Max is just a cat, Daniel insisted. He sleeps 20 hours a day, chases laser pointers, and gets scared by cucumbers. He's not some dormant super weapon, does he? The elder challenged. Does he truly behave as a simple animal? Or have you simply grown so accustomed to him that you no longer notice the impossible things? Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but paused, remembering odd moments over the years he'd owned Max. Doors that opened when they shouldn't. Electronic devices that activated at Max's approach. The way the cat always seemed to know when Daniel was coming home, no matter how irregular his schedule. Even if what you're saying is true, and I'm not agreeing that it is, Daniel said carefully. Max has never shown any signs of being dangerous. He's gentle. Loving even, because you've earned that love, Mothrak said gently. The Sovereign Ones chose humanity for a reason, human. They saw something in your species worth protecting. But tomorrow when you return to that council chamber, when Zixter and the others continue their mockery and contempt, your companion may decide that his human needs protection. What would happen? Daniel asked, fear creeping into his voice now. I don't know, the elder admitted. No one alive has seen a sovereign awaken. But our records speak of entire fleets reduced to scrap, of weapon systems turning against their creators, of technology itself rebelling at their command. They were not conquerors, human, but they were absolute in their protection of those they deemed worthy. Mothrak stood, his movements stiff with age. I've warned you, as my conscience demands. What you do with this information is your choice. But perhaps consider leaving your companion in these quarters tomorrow. For everyone's safety, after the elder left, Daniel sat in silence for a long time, watching Max explore the quarters. And he had nearly convinced himself. The whole conversation was the result of alien superstition and coincidence when Max did something that made his blood run cold. The cat walked up to the door controls, panels designed for beings with opposable thumbs and understanding of alien technology, and placed his paw on the access pad, and the door opened smoothly. Responding to Max's touch as if he were an authorized user, Max looked back at Daniel, meowed once, and strolled out into the corridor. Max, no. Daniel jumped up, chasing after his cat, but Max moved with surprising speed, turning corners like he knew exactly where he was going, despite never having been on the station before. Captain Lisa Morgan appeared from a side corridor, her military bearing evident, even in the casual station clothes she wore. Daniel, is everything okay? My cat escaped, Daniel panted, pointing down the corridor where Max had disappeared. He somehow opened the door. Lisa's expression shifted to concern. These doors require biorecognition or access codes. There's no way a cat could... I know, Daniel interrupted. But he did. Help me find him before he gets into trouble. They searched for over an hour, checking corridor after corridor, until Lisa received a message on her communicator. Security has spotted him on level 47, near the Ancient Vault section. Ancient Vault? Daniel questioned as they hurried to the nearest transport lift. Relics from extinct civilizations, mostly sealed off because no one knows how to access them anymore, Lisa explained. That whole section has been dormant for thousands of years. When they arrived, they found Max sitting calmly in front of a massive sealed doorway, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. And Security Chief Vorn, a hulking being with 6 arms and mineral-based skin, stood nearby looking deeply disturbed. The vault activated when the creature approached, Vorn rumbled, his translator struggling with his species' bass tones. These doors haven't responded to anything in recorded history. Daniel scooped up Max, who purred contentedly in his arms. I'm so sorry. I don't know how he got out. The question isn't how he got out, Vaughn said, staring at Max with an expression somewhere between awe and terror. The question is how he knew where to find something that every species in the galaxy has forgotten. As Daniel carried Max back to their quarters, the cat's green eyes caught the light again, glowing with that same golden radiance. And this time, Daniel couldn't pretend he'd imagined it. What are you, Max? He whispered. Max simply purred and closed his eyes, looking for all the world like nothing more than a content house cat. But Daniel knew better now, and tomorrow's council session suddenly seemed far more dangerous than he'd anticipated. Daniel barely slept that night, lying awake in the oversized bed while Max curled up on his chest, purring with mechanical regularity. And every time he started to drift off, he remembered Mothrak's warnings and the way those vault doors had responded to his seemingly ordinary cat. Morning on the station was marked by a gradual brightening of the bioluminescent walls rather than any sudden change. And Daniel fed Max his usual breakfast of processed Earth food while preparing himself for another session with the council, trying to decide whether he should leave Max in the quarters, as Mothrak had suggested. You're just a cat, right, buddy? Daniel asked, scratching behind Max's ears. Just a normal, regular Earth cat who happens to open alien security doors and activate ancient vaults? Max meowed and rubbed against Daniel's leg, performing the universal cat gesture for feed me more, and Daniel almost laughed at his own paranoia. The decision was taken from him when Captain Lisa arrived with unexpected news. Dr. Helen Price, the station's chief xenobiologist, wanted to meet with Daniel immediately. It's about Max, Lisa said, her expression carefully neutral. Last night's incident with the vault triggered some automatic alerts, and Dr. Price requested permission to run a few scans. Nothing invasive, just external readings, Daniel agreed. Mostly because he wanted answers himself, and they made their way to the medical wing where Dr. Price waited in a laboratory filled with instruments that looked more like art installations than scientific equipment. Dr. Price was a middle-aged woman from Earth, one of the few humans already working on the station as part of the cultural exchange program, and her presence was oddly comforting in the alien environment. Thank you for coming, she said, gesturing to a scanning platform. If you could just place Max here. This won't hurt him at all. Daniel set Max on the platform, and the cat immediately tried to walk off. But Dr. Price activated a harmless containment field that kept him in place while holographic displays sprang to life around them, showing data that scrolled faster than Daniel could read. Remarkable, Dr. Price breathed, her eyes fixed on the displays. Absolutely remarkable. What is it? Daniel asked, feeling his anxiety spike. His genetic structure is wrong, she said bluntly. I mean, it's clearly feline, clearly related to Earth's Felidae family. But there are sequences in his DNA that don't match anything in our databases. And I'm talking about the entire galactic genetic library. Billions of species cataloged over millions of years. She zoomed in on a particular strand of data. Look at this. These markers here suggest genetic manipulation at a level of sophistication that surpasses anything currently available. And the strange part is that these sequences appear to be dormant. Like they're waiting for something to activate them. Activate them how? Daniel's mouth felt dry. I have no idea, Dr. Price admitted. But there's more. Watch what happens when I introduce a standard neural interface signal. She adjusted a control, and suddenly the entire laboratory's lights flickered. Not in the stuttering way of a power failure, but in a wave that pulsed outward from Max in perfect synchronization with his breathing. Every time I try to scan his neural patterns, the station's systems react, Dr. Price explained. her voice filled with scientific excitement and growing concern. It's like he's broadcasting on frequencies that our technology recognizes and responds to. But these frequencies shouldn't even be possible for an organic brain to produce. Max yawned, showing his small fangs, completely unbothered by the lights dancing around him. There's something else. Dr. Price pulled up another display. I did some research last night after hearing about the vault incident. Dug into some really old xenobiological records, and I found references to a species called the Sovereign Ones. Daniel's heart sank. Elder Mothrak told me about them. Ben, you know what they were, Dr. Price said, meeting his eyes, and you can see why I'm concerned. Because if Max is somehow related to that species, even as a distant descendant, bringing him to a political gathering might be extremely dangerous. He's harmless, Daniel protested. But the words sounded weak even to his own ears. Is he? Dr. Price gestured to the still flickering lights. Or is he choosing to be harmless? There's a significant difference. Before Daniel could respond, Security Chief Warren's voice boomed through the laboratory's communication system. Dr. Price, we're experiencing power fluctuations throughout the station. Can you confirm if your experiments are causing this? Dr. Price checked her instruments, and her face went pale. The fluctuations are centered on your quarters, Daniel. Not the lab. They rushed back through the corridors, following the trail of flickering lights and malfunctioning equipment, and found a crowd gathered outside Daniel's door, where every single electronic system was pulsing in perfect rhythm. I sealed the door when the fluctuation started, Vorn explained. His 6 arms crossed in a gesture of authority. But I cannot explain what is happening inside. Daniel pushed through the crowd and placed his hand on the access panel. It's my quarters. I'm going in. The door slid open, and Daniel stepped inside to find his diplomatic briefcase open on the table. Its contents scattered, as if someone had been searching through them. And sitting in the middle of the mess was Max, one paw resting on Daniel's tablet, which displayed images from his presentation about Earth. Max, what did you do? Daniel asked, and the moment he spoke, the power fluctuations stopped. Every system returning to normal simultaneously. Max meowed and jumped down from the table, walking to his food bowl as if nothing unusual had occurred. I think, Dr. Price said from the doorway, that he was looking at your presentation materials, which suggests a level of intelligence and curiosity far beyond a normal animal. Daniel didn't have time to process this revelation because Lisa appeared with a reminder. His second council session was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. He made the decision to bring Max despite the risks, partly because he didn't trust what the cat might do if left alone, and partly because some instinct told him that Max wanted to be there. The council chamber was even more crowded than the day before, word having spread about Earth's petition and the council's likely rejection. And species throughout the station had come to witness what many saw as entertainment, watching a primitive world get put in its place. Daniel took his position in the central speaking area and placed Max's carrier beside him, expecting more mockery but receiving instead an eerie silence as the assembled delegates stared at the carrier with unusual intensity. Commander Zixter rose from his seat, his scales gleaming under the chamber's lights. The council has reviewed Earth's petition and finds it lacking in merit. Your world has nothing to offer that justifies full membership, and your presence here demonstrates why smaller species should serve rather than lead. I disagree, Daniel said, keeping his voice level despite his anger. Earth has successfully unified a divided planet, developed sustainable energy systems, and created art and culture that enriches the human experience. These achievements speak to our potential. Potential is not achievement, Zixter sneered. You want to know what I think of human potential? I'll show you. He activated a holographic display that showed footage from Earth's history, wars, conflicts, environmental destruction. All the worst moments of humanity's past played out for the entire council to witness. This is your species, Zixter's voice dripped with contempt. Violent, short-sighted, unable to cooperate even among yourselves. And you dare to ask for equality with civilizations that have maintained peace for millennia. Daniel felt his face flush with shame and anger. Not because Zixter was entirely wrong, but because the commander was deliberately ignoring all the context. All the progress humanity had made, those images are from our past, Daniel argued. We've learned from our mistakes, grown beyond. You've learned nothing, Zixter interrupted. You remain primitives playing at civilization. And this council has better things to do than coddle a species too weak to earn respect through strength. The chamber erupted in sounds of agreement. And Daniel felt his carefully prepared arguments crumbling under the weight of predetermined judgment. That's when Max's carrier began to shake, not violently but with a steady rhythm. And the mesh door unlatched itself despite being locked, swinging open to release the orange tabby cat who stepped onto the chamber floor with the dignity of royalty. Even your pet abandons you, Krelva chittered. How fitting. But Elder Mothrock rose from his seat, his ancient voice cutting through the mockery. Everyone stop. Do not move. Do not speak. Max walked to the center of the speaking area, his tail held high, and sat down precisely in the middle of the circular platform. And that's when the ancient holographic systems activated. The chamber had been built by long-dead civilizations, incorporating technology from species that had vanished before most current members had even achieved spaceflight. And these systems had been dormant for so long that most delegates had forgotten they existed. Now they blazed to life, projecting symbols in a language that hurt to look at directly. Characters that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could process. And every symbol oriented itself toward Max, as if the cat were the center of the universe. The entire council chamber fell silent, and in that silence, Max's eyes began to glow with golden light that had nothing to do. The golden light emanating from Max's eyes intensified until it filled the entire chamber with a warm radiance that seemed to bypass physical sight and speak directly to every being's consciousness. And Daniel felt something vast and ancient brush against his mind, familiar yet utterly alien. Like hearing his cat's purr amplified across dimensions he couldn't name. The holographic symbols swirled faster now, forming patterns that Daniel's human brain struggled to comprehend, but somehow understood on a level deeper than conscious thought. And through those patterns came a presence. A consciousness that had been sleeping for thousands of years in the small body of an orange tabby cat. Do not be afraid, the voice resonated through the chamber, though Daniel couldn't tell if he heard it with his ears or his mind. And the voice was Max's meow transformed, translated, expanded into something that carried the weight of ages. Commander Zixter had frozen in place, his earlier arrogance replaced by something that looked remarkably like terror. And throughout the chamber, species that had stood proud and confident moments before now shrank back in their seats. What are you? Chancellor Dravok demanded from the highest tier, his crystalline voice cracking with strain. I am Max, the presence answered simply. I am a cat, a companion to Daniel Cooper of Earth. And I am also a descendant of those you called the Sovereign Ones, though we never used that title ourselves. We were simply the Guardians, and we still are. Even in our diminished form, the holographic display shifted, showing images of a civilization that had spanned galaxies. Beings that resembled great cats with coats that shimmered with colors beyond the visible spectrum. And they moved through space itself as if it were merely another room to explore. 10,000 years ago, my ancestors decided to leave this galaxy. Max's voice continued, gentle but absolute, not because we were forced out or defeated, but because our curiosity demanded we see what lay beyond. to explore the infinite universe and discover what wonders waited in the vast darkness between galaxies. The images showed massive ships that looked more like living creatures than machines, departing in a fleet that stretched across star systems. But before we left, we made a choice. We had observed countless species across millions of years, watched civilizations rise and fall, seen the patterns of cruelty and kindness that defined galactic history. We decided to leave guardians behind, Max explained. And new images appeared, showing the great cats selecting certain worlds, certain species, not to rule or control, but to protect the species we believed showed the most promise, the ones who deserved a chance to grow without being crushed by those who valued strength over wisdom. Daniel's throat felt tight as he realized what this meant. We chose Earth, Max said, confirming his thoughts. We chose humanity. Not because you were strong or technologically advanced. Not because you had conquered your world or dominated your ecosystem, but because in all our observations, we saw something rare and precious. The capacity for compassion toward those weaker than yourselves. The hologram showed ancient Earth. Primitive humans sharing food with the first wild cats who dared to approach their settlements. Children playing gently with kittens. Families taking in strays despite having barely enough resources for themselves. We watched humans struggle and fight, make terrible mistakes, and commit awful cruelties, Max acknowledged. But we also watched you choose mercy when vengeance would have been easier. Watched you protect the vulnerable, even at cost to yourselves, and we saw a species worth nurturing, worth protecting. So we left our descendants on your world. The ancient consciousness continued. We altered our genetics to produce smaller forms that would fit into human homes and hearts. We programmed our bloodline to remain dormant unless our chosen species needed us. And for 10,000 years, we have lived among you as house cats. As companions, as friends. Zixter found his voice. Though it shook with barely controlled fear. You've been watching us. All of galactic civilization. For 10,000 years? No, Max said, and there was a hint of feline amusement in the tone. We've been sleeping, living peaceful lives with the humans we love. Chasing birds and napping in sunbeams, being exactly what we appear to be. Cats. Then why reveal yourself now? Elder Mothrak asked, his ancient voice filled with something close to reverence. Because my human was threatened, Max said simply. And the golden light pulsed brighter. Because I listened to the mockery and contempt directed at Daniel. Herd species that should know better judge an entire world based on physical size. And felt my protective instincts activate for the first time in my peaceful life. Daniel realized he was crying. Tears streaming down his face as he understood the depth of what Max was revealing. I am not a weapon, Max continued. I am a guardian. And the difference matters. I don't seek to conquer or control. I simply refuse to allow harm to come to those I protect. And every cat on Earth carries this same dormant programming. Billions of potential guardians living in homes across your planet. The implications hit the Council like a physical force. You're saying, Ambassador Krulva's mandibles trembled, that Earth has billions of descendants of the Sovereign Ones living among them? Living with them, Max corrected. As family, as companions. Bonded through 10,000 years of mutual love and care. And yes, if Earth were threatened, if humanity faced extinction or enslavement, every single one of my kind would awaken to defend them. The station systems began responding to Max's presence now. Not in the chaotic fluctuations of before, but in organized patterns. And Daniel realized with growing awe that Max was demonstrating control over every electronic system within range. Security feeds display across the holographic array, showing every corridor, every ship docked at the station, every weapon system and defense platform, all responding to commands from a small orange cat. The ancient vaults contain technology my ancestors left behind, Max explained. emergency systems in case our chosen species ever faced annihilation. And these systems recognize my bloodline. They respond to my commands because I carry the genetic keys to activate them. Throughout the station, dormant defense platforms that hadn't moved in millennia began to hum with power. Not threatening, but clearly capable. I want to be absolutely clear. Max's voice took on a firmer tone. I activated these systems not to threaten you, but to demonstrate a truth you seem to have forgotten. Power is not about size. Strength is not measured in physical dominance. And the most dangerous guardians are those who fight not for conquest, but for love. The golden light began to fade. But Max's eyes still glowed as he looked up at Zixter. You mocked Daniel for his size, insulted humanity for its youth, and judged an entire species based on your own limited understanding of worth. But you never asked the question that matters. What has Earth done to earn such powerful guardians? Zixter said nothing, his earlier arrogance completely shattered. The answer, Max said gently, is that humanity earned our protection through 10,000 years of kindness. They didn't know we were descendants of an ancient civilization. They didn't choose to befriend us for strategic advantage. They simply loved us because they have the capacity to love creatures weaker than themselves. To nurture and protect without demanding servitude in return. The holographic displays showed scenes from Earth. Children cuddling with cats. Elderly humans finding comfort in feline companionship. Families rescuing strays from danger, and throughout it all, cats choosing to stay, choosing to bond, choosing humanity again and again across millennia. This is the strength you failed to see, Max concluded. Not military might or technological superiority, but the strength to be gentle, the power to choose compassion, the courage to protect the vulnerable, even when it offers no strategic advantage. The council chamber remained absolutely silent as Max's presence began to withdraw, the ancient consciousness retreating back into the small form of a house cat. I'm going back to sleep now, Max said, his voice already sounding less vast. More like the simple meow Daniel knew, because my human is safe. And the council understands that threatening Earth means awakening billions of guardians, who will not hesitate to protect the species they love, not because we seek war, but because we choose to defend those worth defending. The golden light faded completely, and Max sat there looking like nothing more than a slightly confused orange tabby, blinking at the assembled delegates with typical feline indifference. Then he walked over to Daniel, rubbed against his legs, and meowed plaintively, the universal cat sound for I'm hungry. And despite everything, despite the revelation and the power and the ancient consciousness, Daniel found himself laughing through his tears as he picked up his cat. His guardian, his friend. Let's get you some food. Buddy, he whispered, but first. He turned to face the council, still holding Max in his arms. And his voice was steady when he spoke. So, about Earth's petition for full membership. No one in the chamber dared to object. The council chamber remained frozen in stunned silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. And Daniel stood there holding Max, feeling the cat's familiar weight in his arms, while trying to process the fact that his ordinary pet had just revealed himself as a descendant of the galaxy's most powerful ancient civilization. Chancellor Dreyvolk was the first to move, rising from his seat in the highest tier with a slow deliberateness that suggested careful thought rather than hasty reaction. And his crystalline form seemed to shimmer with an emotion Daniel's limited experience with his species couldn't quite identify. On behalf of the Galactic Council, Dreyvolk's voice rang through the chamber with formal precision. I offer humanity and its representative our deepest apologies for the disrespect shown during these proceedings. We have failed in our duty to evaluate species based on merit and potential rather than physical appearance and cultural assumptions. Commander Zixter rose next, and the proud reptilian who had mocked Daniel so cruelly now looked diminished somehow. as if the revelation had physically shrunk his imposing stature. "I spoke in ignorance and arrogance," he said, his voice lacking all its earlier contempt. "I judged your species without understanding, and in doing so, I not only insulted humanity, but demonstrated my own lack of wisdom. I formally apologize and withdraw all objections to Earth's petition." Similar statements came from around the chamber as delegate after delegate acknowledged their mistakes. And Daniel felt a strange mixture of vindication and discomfort, because this wasn't how he had wanted to earn the council's respect. "May I speak?" Daniel asked, and the council immediately fell silent, granting him a level of attention he hadn't received before. "Earth didn't come here seeking fear or dominance," Daniel began, adjusting his hold on Max, who had started to purr contentedly. "We came seeking partnership, cooperation, and the chance to contribute to galactic civilization. And while I'm grateful for the Council's change of heart, I don't want that change to be based solely on fear of what Max and his kind could do if threatened. I don't want that change to be based threatened." He looked around at the assembled delegates. Meeting as many eyes as he could, humanity earned the protection of the Guardians through 10,000 years of simple kindness, through choosing to care for creatures who couldn't offer us military might or technological advantage. And that's the strength I want the Council to recognize, not the power of our Guardians, but the character that earned their loyalty. Elder Mothrak nodded approvingly from his seat, and Daniel felt encouraged to continue. "Earth has made mistakes. Terrible ones," Daniel acknowledged. "We fought wars, damaged our environment, and sometimes failed to live up to our own ideals. But we've also learned, grown, and built a civilization that values compassion, creativity, and cooperation. These are the qualities we offer to the galactic community." Ambassador Krelva clicked forward slightly in her seat. "You speak of partnership, but you must understand that the revelation of Earth's Guardians fundamentally changes the power dynamic, whether you wish it or not. Your world now commands respect through strength. Then we'll have to work to earn respect through our actions instead," Daniel replied firmly. "Yes, Earth has powerful Guardians, but we don't want to build our relationships on threats and fear. We want to trade knowledge, share culture, and contribute to solving the challenges that face all species in the galaxy." Dr. Price's voice came through Daniel's communicator. "Daniel, I'm monitoring the station systems, and the ancient defense platforms are still active. They're not threatening anything, but they're definitely powered up and waiting." Max meowed and shifted in Daniel's arms, and immediately the holographic displays flickered back to life, showing the defense platforms beginning to power down, returning to their dormant state as if responding to an unspoken command. "As you can see," Daniel said with a slight smile, "our Guardians respond to peace as readily as they respond to threats. Max activated those systems to protect me, and now he's deactivating them because the danger has passed. This is the relationship Earth wants with the galaxy. Peaceful cooperation with the strength to defend ourselves if necessary, but always preferring dialogue over conflict." Chancellor Drevok considered this for a long moment before speaking. "The Council recognizes Earth's petition for full membership and grants it immediately, along with open trading rights and access to galactic information networks. Furthermore, we propose that Earth serves on the Council's diplomatic committee, as your species clearly has insights into building relationships across power imbalances that we could benefit from learning. We accept with gratitude," Daniel said, "and we look forward to contributing to the Council's work. There is one question I must ask," Zixter said, his tone now respectful rather than mocking. "The Guardians left behind technology and defense systems across the galaxy. Who controls these now? Is Earth suddenly the most powerful military force in known space?" Max chose that moment to yawn, showing his small fangs, and then jumped down from Daniel's arms, to investigate a spot on the floor that apparently needed immediate sniffing. "I think," Daniel said, watching his cat with affection, "that Max and his kind control those systems. And they'll use them only to protect humanity if we're threatened with extinction or enslavement. Otherwise, they're content to be house cats, napping in sunbeams and demanding treats at inconvenient times." "Remarkable," Elder Mothrak said softly. "A species powerful enough to rule the galaxy, choosing instead to live as beloved companions. This speaks to a wisdom we have forgotten in our pursuit of expansion and influence." The council session continued for several more hours as details were worked out, trade agreements established, and cultural exchange programs proposed. And through it all, Max alternated between sleeping in his carrier and wandering the chamber floor, receiving respectful nods and careful distances from delegates who now understood exactly what he represented. Captain Lisa arrived with another human delegate, a woman named Karen White, who had been stationed on a nearby world and rushed to the station when news of the revelation spread through human channels. "I had to come see it for myself," Karen said, staring at Max with wide eyes. "Every cat on Earth is a descendant of the Sovereign Ones. My cat Whiskers, my sister's cat Mittens, all of them?" "All of them," Daniel confirmed. "Though most will probably never awaken like Max did. They'll just continue being cats." Which honestly seems to be what they prefer. As the session finally concluded and delegates began filing out, many stopped to speak with Daniel, offering genuine welcomes to Earth and expressing interest in learning more about humanity. And the tone was completely different from the mockery and dismissal of the previous days. Zixter approached last, his massive form somehow seeming less intimidating now. "I learned an important lesson today," he said quietly. "That judging others based on appearance or size reveals only one's own ignorance. Earth is fortunate to have you as its representative, and I hope we can build a better relationship moving forward." "I'd like that," Daniel said sincerely. "We all make mistakes. What matters is whether we learn from them." As Daniel prepared to return to his quarters, Dr. Price caught up with him, her scientific excitement barely contained. "The Council has asked if I can study the Guardian technology with your permission, purely for academic purposes. Understanding their quantum manipulation techniques could advance our physics by centuries. You'll have to ask Max," Daniel said with a smile. "He's the one who controls access to it." That evening, back in his quarters, Daniel sat by the window, looking out at the stars, while Max curled up in his lap, purring with the steady rhythm that had comforted him for years. "You know," Daniel said quietly, "you could have told me you were a descendant of an ancient civilization." Max looked up at him with those green eyes, now returned to their normal appearance, and meowed once, which Daniel chose to interpret as "you never asked." "Fair point," Daniel laughed, scratching behind Max's ears. "I just want you to know that it doesn't change anything between us. You're still my cat, my friend, my family, whether you're a regular house cat or a dormant guardian of the galaxy." Max's purr intensified, and Daniel could feel the vibration through his chest, a small reminder of the vast power that lay sleeping in this compact form. "We're going to do good work here," Daniel said, looking back out at the stars. "Earth and the galaxy, humans and aliens, building something better together, and maybe along the way, we'll remind them that the most important strength isn't the power to destroy, but the courage to protect, the wisdom to choose peace, and the compassion to care for those who need us." Max meowed in agreement, then yawned and settled back into sleep, because ultimately, despite being a descendant of the Sovereign Ones, despite controlling ancient technology and commanding galaxy-spanning defense systems, he was still a cat, and cats, as any human knows, have their priorities clearly established: food, naps, and the occasional world-saving revelation. But mostly naps. Daniel smiled and closed his eyes, feeling more at peace than he had since arriving at the station. because he finally understood what Earth truly offered the galaxy. Not military might or technological superiority, but the simple, powerful lesson that kindness matters. That protecting the